how did you first learn about, connect with Equip?
Yeah. So we first heard about Equip at the first Revoice conference in St. Louis. And I think it was actually through a workshop that Peter did, where I first got exposed to the ministry of Equip. And what struck me about Equip at that time was that it was relevant to a local church pastor and what a local church pastor needed. Because I think, church pastors, I think, were good at finding individual counseling tools or tools to work with individual pastoral situations. But to have a resource that helps us think systematically, church-wide, how we can grow and develop as a whole church, that was something I never heard of. And to realize that there was somebody out there who was going to help us do that, help us think system-wide, that was very significant. And so, that's where we first heard about Equip and what struck me right away about Equip's ministry.
Yeah. So how has Equip partnered with your church? What does that look like?
So Equip has partnered with us by, providing the resources for the local church level. We had Equip team leaders, specifically Peter, came and visited us and spent, I think over 16 hours with our leadership team to walk us through some fundamental foundational paradigms of how to think about God and LGBT persons and how God would want his people to respond and embrace and walk with LGBT persons. And so Equip, I think, put in the heavy work of spending time with us, training us, walking with us. And what was really special about that, I think, was Equip's commitment to do not just the behind the scenes heavy lifting, but also the upfront heavy lifting. I think it was very helpful for our church to have an Equip leader up front on a Sunday, at least twice in this period of training, just talk to our whole church and help our whole church along. And so the personal care, but also the structural work with our leadership behind the scenes and also with the church up front was very, very powerful.
Cool. Yeah, tell me more about what has been most helpful about the training and support that Equip has provided.
Yeah. I think probably the most helpful thing has been just the basic fact of the basic opening up of the conversation in a more public setting for our church and our church leadership. Yeah. Like just to help us get past that hump of talking about this. Again, I think in our church context before, we would have a lot of more private conversations with LGBTQ persons, or maybe in smaller groups of leaders. And part of the reason we did that was because, we didn't know how to talk about this more publicly. We didn't have the language, the paradigms, and the coaching through it. And so Equipped helped us advance the conversation. And then it gave us just the structure needed to not just talk about it, but also to think through some of the theological issues, to think through how to structure these conversations in the right way. Church.
That makes sense. Yeah. So at what moment did the importance of this work at your church really click, really set in? And why do you think that made the difference?
Yeah. I think probably I remember one of our Equip meetings with our leadership team of 12 that was invited to join in this process. I think there was a moment in one of our meetings where one of our leaders felt safe themselves to disclose their same-sex attraction journey with the rest of the team. And none of us at the church had ever known that about her past. And I think she even prefaced her sharing by saying, hey, well, I feel like this is finally a safe place for me to share this. And she just kind of shared it with us. And what I think that did for our church leadership was to help us realize, my goodness, there are a lot of people probably in our churches, even serving in our churches, even at the leadership level in our churches, who have not felt safe before, to tell us this and walk and open themselves up to the journey that they're on, and allow us to be a part of that. And so when that happened at one of these equip trainings, we're like, oh wow, it was a sacred moment. And I think it was a moment that just helped us realize, yeah, we really need to figure this out, because there are people in our church and definitely in our community that just need that safe space to process and walk through this journey. Yeah.
One of the things we're trying to do during the season is, collect stories from churches we've worked with about ways that the training of Equip have helped pastors like you better minister to gay people and parents of gay people and friends of gay people. And a lot of that is so that the people who've been, praying for Equip and the people who've been giving money so that we can do some of this work would kind of see what the ultimate labor of or fruit of their labor has been. So yeah, would you mind sharing a story or two about, how you were able to use your training with Equip to better minister to gay people?
Yeah. So, probably two stories that I can think of. One is, I think from our journey with gay people in our church community, one of the sentiments we hear often from gay people is that, number one, they've been hurt by the church, and number two, their voices have been pushed aside or marginalized in the church. And I think for many pastors, that's heartbreaking, and we just don't know what to do. Again, maybe we know how to talk individually to a gay person, but beyond that individual conversation, I mean, how can we? What else? What else can we do? And so, since having our Equip training, we have had at least two of our leaders, our developing leaders who identify as gay. They've just kind of risen up in our leadership, feeling more empowered and encouraged to share with the rest of us about their journey, and then to help us better understand who they are and also their gay friends and community. As a result of these things, the Equip process includes a blueprint process where our church is supposed to lay out a plan of action for the next couple of years about how we're going to continue to grow in our ministry to gay persons and with gay persons. We have seen these two leaders, feel safe and empowered to engage with leadership and be a part of the transformation process. And so, it's been so encouraging to such an extent where one of them in this next year is doing an internship at the church, and she will be helping us create a specific small group for gay people to come to who may or may not know Jesus yet, but the small group will be a safe space for gay persons to explore issues of sexuality and faith without any pressure to choose a side or choose one or the other, but just, they'll have this safe space to step into. And again, I think for us as a church, that's just so important that we provide that for people, especially in our city. We happen to live and minister in kind of I would say the gay epicenter of our state, the Pride office for the state. Our state is right here in our zip code. And so that's been really powerful and helpful for our context.
Very cool. Yeah, that's encouraging to hear. Just that the people in your church have felt more comfortable sharing because how they see and hear your leaders talking about this. They feel more safe, and this is a place I can talk about this. And then that you guys are creating that space for even more gay people to be connected with your church and hopefully get to know Jesus if they don't already. That's really encouraging to hear.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah. Well, what advice would you have for pastors who want to better minister to gay people in their churches? What advice would you have, having gone down this road already?
Yeah. if you're a pastor listening to this or watching this, I would just say, you know what, you're not alone in the questions you have and in the struggles you have. I think many of us, have that compassionate heart. We want to see, the love and good news of Jesus enter into gay people's lives and empower them, encourage them, transform them, and all these things. But if you're like me, and I had years of seminary training, I have a doctorate in this stuff. Like I just didn't know. I didn't know how to keep moving forward. And I had, I have gay family members. I'm surrounded by gay individuals, but I just didn't know how to move forward as a church into this sort of ministry. And I think one of the best things we can do as pastors is to acknowledge that, number one, we don't have all the answers, and number two, that we need help.
Yeah.
And I feel like Equip has been a source of answers and help for me as a pastor, for us as a church, in ways that we needed, in ways that were gracious and loving and insightful and ultimately helpful for our city. And so, I would just say as a pastor, reach out and find some help. And the great thing is Equip is ready to help, not in some, we know it all sort of way, but in a very gracious and humble sort of way. And I've been really encouraged and also empowered to move forward as a pastor.
Well, thanks for the encouragement. Yeah, I've heard a number of pastors share over this past month that one of the biggest barriers to doing this work has been realizing, there's been decades that the church has been ignoring this conversation or having this conversation poorly, and it's so there's a lot of baggage to clean out before you even can get to doing this work well. And that's not baggage that these pastors have built up. It's someone else's baggage, right? And so there's a certain dread as pastors look at this work of saying, in order to do this well, I've got to undo the poor work of decades of people before me. And that's not fair. And that may be impossible. How, when you face that in different ways, or when you're connecting with pastors in your networks that are facing that same barrier, how do you get through that barrier? How do you get over that barrier?
I don't think there's an easy way to get through the barrier, number one. But I think the best thing we can do as pastors is to make sure we listen well. There's nothing as powerful as listening, humbly listening, and trying our best to truly understand people's pain and experiences and their journey. And so I think, especially gay persons and also allies of gay persons, like they're tired of rhetoric. They're tired of empty promises. They're tired of theological statements. They need to see actual change in action. But that all really begins with listening well. And so I think first step and a step to continue to press into is making sure we just listen to people who are grieving, who are mourning, who are angry, and walk with them through it. And I've been encouraged and challenged myself to do that more and more as I see the fruit of listening well in our context. And so,
that's powerful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing about how this work has been going at your church and the difference this kind of work has been making in the lives of people in your church. It's encouraging for me to hear because I'm disconnected. I don't get to watch. I'm not a fly on the wall, and I don't get to watch how all this plays out for you guys. And so it's cool for me to hear as well what this looks like. So
yeah. Thanks, Peter.
For sure.